Hi, I'm Dajana Yoakley. I'm a peaceful parenting coach and mom of three, and I'm delighted to give you the latest science-backed research on child development, parenting, and to support you in showing up as the parent that you want to be. Welcome. Welcome, everybody. Thanks for joining us on the podcast today. I'm here with Kim Hopkins. Welcome, Kim. I'm so delighted to have you here today.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I'm really excited today. We are talking about how we can intervene in parenting in a more effective way related to our kids. Big feelings, challenging behavior, when emotions are high, when skills are lacking. Kim comes from a background of she's trained with CPS, which is Collaborative and Proactive Solutions, as developed by Dr. Ross Green. She's also a licensed clinical social worker and director of learning and resources with Lives in Balance with Dr. Ross Green's organization. So Kim is going to teach us today about how we can intervene with kids in a more collaborative way. It's really like the way that I think about it. It's like this nonviolent intervention with kids, which is different than like punishing, consequences, threats, which I don't think work anyway long term. They work in the short term sometimes, not always. And they're just really not as effective. So this is a process that is really more effective in your parenting, especially if your kid tends to be more explosive. But even if they're not, we're going to talk about how really this approach works for all kids, whether they're explosive or not. When kids are stressed, when they're lacking skills, they need more resources and support. And how can we show up as parents to give them that? So yeah, without much more introduction than that, I'd love for you to share with us, Kim, about how you came to do this work. And then maybe you can elaborate a little bit more on my intro.
Sure. Well, at the beginning of my career, I worked in residential care with kids who, struggled emotionally, behaviorally. They couldn't live at home. Because of it, they often couldn't attend their public school. And the way we were taught to help them was the exact opposite of Dr. Green's work. And we realized that we weren't really helping them, or if they did make gains with us, they didn't sustain those gains when they moved to a less restrictive setting. Like if they did reunify home, or they went to
Uh-huh.
a foster home, or they went um, back to their public school, they often fell apart. And so we're thinking about that. And we were thinking about how we were restraining them a lot. We were holding them down on the ground a lot. And it was not as therapeutic as we were taught it was.
Yeah.
And it just sort of was serendipity that somebody recommended I go hear Dr. Green speak. And it wasn't far from where I lived. I didn't know I was going to find the answer to everything we were grappling with.
Wow.
But like 15 minutes in, I was like, whoa, this is what we need to do.
Yeah.
And it was a 180-degree shift from what we were doing. But the results before we were even good at the model were remarkable, nothing short of remarkable. Since then, that was about 25 years ago. So about the past 18 years, I've had the honor and privilege of working with Dr. Green and talking about his work when he can't be there, and have since become a parent and used it at home, and have just seen amazing results in all different environments with all different kids, regardless of their behavioral presentation.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I completely agree. I mean, when parents learn to parent differently than kind of the traditional methods, and like you said, even in um, organizational settings, um, you know, we kind of have been doing things the best that we knew how, given the resources and the information we had at the time. But then something different and more evolved comes along, and it can many times work better, right? In this case, it's been, like you said, like a 180. So would you walk us through the framework of collaborative and proactive, like this framework of what are the elements, and then we can dive deeper into how to
Sure.
implement them a little bit more.
First, it's important to kind of think about the key themes of the model, so that there's an understanding of how we think about kids and how we approach things before we talk about what we actually do.
Yeah.
The collaborative and proactive solutions model, the first key theme is that we focus on problems and solving problems rather than on behavior and modifying behavior. Again, I
Yeah.
was taught behavior modification, right? And
Right.
so this was a total shift in thinking. We need to think about what pushes them in the stream in the first place, right? So if kids, when they're in the water, right, using this sort of fable that we like to reference, there's a community that lives upstream and a community that lives downstream. In the downstream community, they look over in the water and they're like, why are people yelling for help there? We must help them, right? They're drowning. So they spend all their energy and attention on rescuing people and doing their best. They're exhausted, right? And what they don't do is get out of the water and dry off and walk upstream and say to the upstream community, how come people who cannot swim keep falling in the water and putting their energy and effort upstream? So this is an
Yeah.
upstream model, right? When kids are in the water, they're doing behavior, and a lot of ways we're taught to help kids has to do with like they're in the water, right? And how
Yeah.
often and how far down do they go, as opposed to what pushed them in. When we walk upstream, we find that what pushed them in are problems that they didn't have what they needed to solve.
Mhm.
And so if we focus on solving problems and simply just all behavior tells us is it's like the signal that there's a problem we need to go look at, no matter what the behavior is. Some kids are really lucky in how they signal to us because they cry and they sulk. Some kids are really unlucky in how they signal to us and they're dangerous, and explosive.
Mhm.
What their signal looks like doesn't matter to us. What matters is, oh, that was the signal. That was the communication. Now we need to go upstream and find what was the problem that they didn't know how to solve. And that's
Mhm.
then when we're solving problems, the second key theme is we're doing it collaboratively. This is an ask the kid model. Even young kids or even kids who do not communicate with mouth words, we're still going to
Yes.
collaborate with them because they have
Mhm.
some insider information that we
Mhm.
can't observe. Their perception, right? We can't observe it. We can observe their feelings and certainly their behavior, but we want to know their thinking, right? So we want to partner with them for that reason, but also because partnering with them will give them practice solving problems, which we know they need because
Yes. Oh, I love that.
yes, their behavior communication told us that, right? And this
Yes.
is a much higher form of accountability when we partner with kids to solve problems rather than, you got to serve a sentence, you got to serve a punishment. That's actually a false sense of accountability.
Mhm.
The third key theme is, the kind of problem solving we're doing. Yes, we're collaborating, but we want to be thinking about our timing. This is a proactive model. So we like
Mhm.
to say, don't be late. The best time to solve a problem with a kid is not while it's happening. You
Mhm.
really want to figure that out so you can get ahead of it or talk outside of it so that it doesn't happen again. So this is not a reactive model. You can apply the model in the heat of the moment, but actually the whole goal is to get you out of the heat of the moment. The
Yeah.
more proactive problem solving you do with kids, the less heat of the moment intervention you're going to need. In
Mhm.
order to do that, though, kids need to be predictable to us, so we have to figure out why do they respond so poorly to problems and frustrations, and when does that happen? And so the first step in the model is to figure that out, make the kid predictable, right? We have an assessment tool that we use to do that, which is accessible on our website for free at any time that people want to look at that, along with some instructions on how to use it.
Mhm.
Then the fourth key theme, and you might have heard this if you've heard anything about Dr. Green's work, it's kind of our tagline, kids do well if they can. Those are the
Yeah,
lenses.
exactly.
Yeah, we're using to like approach when we're seeing a behavior, right? Well, if they could be doing well, they'd be doing well. So they're not doing well, what's getting in the way? And we want to be curious, right? Which is different than how I was trained. I was trained the opposite, that kids do well if they wanna. And if
Right.
they want to do well, they do well. And if they don't want to do well, they don't pull it off. But if you're thinking kids do well if they wanna, you only have one tool in your bag of tricks. That's to make them wanna, and we make them right by rewarding the behaviors we like and punishing the ones we don't. Right. And as you said, that typically doesn't get the job done at all, or it doesn't last. Right. And that's certainly what we have found, and what I was dealing with back when I found this work. So
Mhm.
kids will do well if they can. When they're not doing well, we need to figure out what's getting in their way. Um,
Mhm.
we have a bunch of research that has nothing to do with the model. It's like 60 years of research that tells us what's getting in their way. They're struggling to access the skills they need, right, to solve problems. So it's a skills deficit, right? We need to do something about these skills they're struggling to access, and which is leading to unsolved problems, right? So those are really the two pieces that we're thinking about when we're trying to help kids.
Mm-hmm.
Lastly, even when it's hard, we're always keeping in mind that doing well is preferable to not doing well. Why would your kid not want to do well? Life goes so much better for her when she can meet your expectations, you know?
Yeah.
Um, so, you know, as humans, we all do the best we can in situations we find ourselves in. That is the same for our kids, right? So that's
Yeah.
kind of the stance we're taking as we approach trying to help our kids.
Yeah, and I love it. It's very, again, like just at minimum, it's nonviolent. And then like at its highest, it's like this deep belief that children are actually good. And like, so I think that's a big paradigm shift for some parents. And sometimes, even if they believe that on their good days, when they're triggered, the negativity bias kind of it messes with their own perception, and it's like they're doing this on purpose. They would, why would they be doing this? And there's no other reason. They're choosing to do it. What has been most helpful that you see with, caregivers or parents to shift that paradigm on a more consistent basis, on a long-term basis, that we're all doing the best that we can with the resources we have, and we're wired for connection, not dysregulation. And when we're dysregulated, we're actually suffering and we need help.
Yeah. I think I know many parents have like a catchphrase that they find that speaks to them, that, that reminds them that I
Mm-hmm.
know in our parents Facebook group, the B team, what's real popular is, trying to remember my kid is not giving me a hard time, they're having a hard time. So like reframing, right? And I also think it starts with let yourself off the hook, because we don't know why some kids come here more skilled than others. We don't know. And
Mm-hmm.
it's not all nature and it's not all nurture and nobody knows, right?
Yeah, yeah,
And
yeah,
I
yeah,
think parents are blamed a lot. And
yeah.
my daughter came here more skilled than my son, right? And when she's older and she would go through the school system, and I would get these like, singing praises and stuff. And I worked really hard not to like take it in as my own, right?
Yeah,
Because I
yeah.
would just respond with, yeah, we're really lucky. Because I won't take all the credit for her because you're not going to give me the blame for him. Like
Yeah, yeah. It's either all or nothing, right?
yeah,
Like,
he came here less skilled. I don't know why. He just did, right? And so absolving ourselves of blame, we are also doing the best we can, right? And as you said before, when we know better, we do better. When we realize, okay, there's more progress that has been made in this wild ride called parenting, right? We learn something new, we can do better. Um,
mm-hmm.
and yeah, I think kind of between like what reminds me of this mindset I want to have when I most need it, even having visuals, right? Um,
Yeah,
even teaching kids, about the model and how it's
yeah.
different from traditional parenting. I think that's great.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Mm-hmm.
that can help too. And not blaming ourselves because we are not to blame.
I love that you're touching on that because, I think if a parent doesn't reflect on that in that regard, they might just think, well, it is my kid's fault. They are the ones doing this to me. But when you take a closer look, maybe like, there's a part of us that feels like, well, if I knew better, I should do better.
Right.
Kind of like we're projecting onto our child this belief that we maybe have about a part of ourselves, like,
Huh. Like I'm
like,
responsible for this. And
yeah,
and we
and
are,
blaming
but not
ourselves,
in
like,
that way. Like not in the like you're
right.
the reason that your child acts out. Like again, we don't know why they might have
Yeah.
trouble accessing skills. And here's the good news. We don't need to know why. The
Mm-hmm.
intervention is the same. So let's be kind to ourselves. Let's be kind to them because it is not willful and intentional. They would prefer it to go better. They don't want
Mm-hmm.
you to feel disrespected and all these other feelings. They'd
Mhm.
much rather have it go smoothly. So keeping all that in mind, we got to do something different.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I love that. And then I wanted to ask you about how when we're teaching skills to children, there's like skills that are more about like, maybe getting a task completed or a sequence of events or behavior like expectations. And then there's other skills related to like emotional regulation skills. Um, so kind of like the ability to regulate stress and execute on these other skills, right? So when we're talking about this model, we're talking about teaching kids both types, right? Like, and maybe that's not how you would categorize it, but I know sometimes kids are trying to learn these skills, maybe executive function skills and things like, self-organization, but then their overwhelm of the stress dysregulates them. And now they can't execute on these kind of more practical skills. Can you talk a little bit about like how this model kind of builds probably all skills? Because it's all
Yes. And it's,
integration of the brain, not just left, right, prefrontal cortex, amygdala, right?
yeah, yeah. And it's interesting because even though skills are at the heart, they're not the focus of our intervention because it becomes too intangible, honestly. So
Uh-huh.
we use the assessment of skills and unsolved problems to first figure out what skills do I think my child is struggling to access? And
Okay.
then when does that happen? What are these unsolved problems? In other words, these expectations I have for my child that they don't regularly do, right? And
Mm-hmm.
so it's those unsolved problems that we're going to give kids experience solving. So, yes, we're going to solve them, but we're going to give kids experience solving them by partnering with them and helping them. By doing that, we're going to enhance the very skills that started everything, right? So it's not
Mm-hmm.
direct, it's an indirect
I see.
kind of thing. And we are talking about critical thinking skills. We're talking
Yeah.
about the ability to be flexible and adaptive and solve problems and tolerate frustration and understand language and regulate emotions, right? And so the skills on the assessment, while they're not an exhaustive list, they are the ones most frequently found in kids who
Yeah. Yeah.
um, don't respond well to problems and frustrations. And so things on there like persisting on challenging or tedious tasks, right? Regulating impulses and understanding, having interoception, like understanding and being able to read how they're feeling so that they can respond, right? And regulating activity level. And so these different types of critical thinking skills that are needed to be flexible and adaptive and solve problems and be able to meet expectations. That's what, and then certainly dovetails with kind of the practical, so rather than talk to a kid about, you know you have difficulty reading social cues, right? I'm going to talk to them about when I see this play out. It seems like, you and your friend have difficulty agreeing on the rules of Monopoly when you had a play date last week, right? That's a much more tangible, specific, recent example. That's what we're going to problem solve. And we're going to walk through the three-step
Mm-hmm.
process of the model to solve that problem. So, yes, get it solved, but walk the kid through the process of solving it so that they get doses of that. And eventually they're going to solve problems without us, which is exactly what we want to have happen.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love that. It's like we're role modeling and then we're doing it collaboratively, and now they're doing it on their own and without our support. So it's this like transition period where we're I mean, we first have to know what the role modeling should look like, right? As parents, it's like, well, this is what, you know, when we're playing a game and you lose, what should that look like? It doesn't feel good to lose like a board game, it makes you want to throw the whole thing across the room. But what ends up happening is your friend doesn't want to play with you anymore. Nobody wants to play board games with you because you always throw everything at the end if you lose. So what does that look like? What's good losing look like, or being a good team sport look like? Um, and then giving them the experiences. I love how you're saying like it's the indirect teaching that build the skills. Like the process of going through it actually builds the skills that they need to fine tune like these specific problems. And really, it's like universal. Like once they get practice, then they can apply that to any new problem, right? Right? Because it's that neural pathway of like those key qualities of like frustration tolerance, like you said, and like some of these other things. Once they get practice at that, then new problems that arise that you haven't even had a chance to like look at, they'll have the skills for that because um, it's the same brain patterns that are used or nervous system patterns that are used for application, right?
Yeah, and in the spirit of like, we always worry about who are we turning out there into the world? Well, the skills are going to be transferable, and that's always what we want, right? To impart our wisdom and help our kids be able to do good things for themselves when we're not around. And
Mm-hmm.
so that's this model will help you accomplish that, which I take a lot of comfort in.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, exactly. I'd love for you to touch on, let's say a parent listening to this podcast is thinking like, we have so many things we're struggling with, like, and it's relative. Like everybody has challenges in parenting. We all have our doses of stress and inconveniences. But how can a parent kind of figure out like where to start? It can feel so overwhelming. What's a good way to filter out like, okay, if I'm going to try this approach, like, let me start with this specific thing. How do you know what that thing should be?
Yeah, I think first, um, really there, there's some free resources on our website. There's a couple of short videos to really just dive into those key themes I mentioned at the beginning to
Yeah.
get yourself sort of like in the mindset, right?
Yeah.
And then we say it all starts with the ASIP. It all starts with that assessment of skills and unsolved problems. You need to know what your kid struggles to do before you can make a plan to fix it, right? And if
Uh-huh.
you have a kid who has 50 unsolved problems in the course of their week, right? You can't solve everything all at once. So you're going to need to know what those 50 things are because now you can make a plan, right? What are you going to work on now? What's high priority? But you're only going to work on one or two or three at a time. Um, and then for everything else, what are you doing? Because we do have options, right? Yes, there is the model, which, when we talk about, we always have three options for handling unmet expectations or unsolved problems. We call them plans, right? So if you have an expectation for your kid, if you expect that your child get ready for bed at 8 p.m. and they do it, great. You don't need a plan. You only need a plan when your expectation is not being met.
Mhm.
So we call them plans A, B, and C. Those are your three options. Plan B is the model, and you're going to use the model for your high priority unsolved problems, but only one to three at a time. And those are separate conversations, one per conversation.
Uh-huh.
Plan A, we don't love plan A. That's how we were typically taught to parent. That's like, I'm in control. I'm a good problem solver. I'm going to decide how it's going to go. And it often includes some sort of punishment, right? Our relationship with our kids actually gets a little deteriorated when we do that. We're teaching them nothing in terms of skills, right? And we can actually make things worse, which we don't want to be doing.
Mhm.
So we're not fans of plan A. Plan C, while it's not the model, is very useful. So if you have a kid with 50 unsolved problems and you're only working on two, you're going to need plan C for the rest. You're going to need to give yourself permission to stop asking your kid to do things that they cannot do, that
Uh-huh.
reliably pull off. And that could look different. Some smaller unsolved problems, you're just going to not bring it up. Some that you can't just not bring up, but you're not solving yet. You're going to need an interim Band-Aid plan that you and your child agree on, though, for how are you going to kind of put this on ice? How are we going to circumvent this for now? Like, and I'm not telling people what to do, but as an example that some families have said, right? Like sometimes there's dinner time unsolved problems and it's pretty clear that the expectation that you sit at dinner and eat with all of us for 20 minutes doesn't go well. And maybe you got bigger fish to fry. So you might choose to plan C that, again, one example,
Mhm.
and the child does not need to eat with everybody and they eat separately. They eat earlier or they eat in a different space or they eat later or something like that. Now, we're not pursuing our expectation. So that's why this is temporary, right? Because our
Yeah.
expectation.
Yeah.
However, the relationship stays intact. We're calming things down, right? But we're not teaching any skills either. We're not giving any doses of problem solving, training. So it's temporary but useful because
Mhm.
you can't keep unsolved on its plate. You won't get anywhere, right? 1 to 3 on there, using the model, the 3 steps of the model to work on those. Then you get them solved. Then you take something you've been plan seeing and work on it, and it's progress in that way. Um,
Mhm.
so it all starts with the ASIP, and you gotta get your list of unsolved problems to decide what am I working on and what am I using plan C for the rest, and get comfortable and okay with that.
Yeah, yeah, and I love that because it's like an executive function for the parent really to prioritize. Like that's part of planning and prioritizing, like first things first. So you can't do 10 things at the same time. There's no such thing as multitasking. And really, like if you try to do a bunch of stuff, it's going to stress your nervous system out and your kid's nervous system. And now you're no longer in learning mode. Now those top priorities aren't even as effectively being taught because it's like you're doing it half. You're doing it stressed out because you're trying to do everything. So yeah, I think that's a really helpful reframe. I was just thinking of when you were saying plans. Yeah, I was thinking of like a cast on a broken leg.
Mhm.
It's like it's not working, it's broken. But we're going to put a cast on it to stabilize it for the time being until we can take care of some other more prominent injuries, and then we'll get back to that and rehabilitate that. But we're not going to make it worse, like you said, because the relationship will suffer. And that's one of the resources for nervous system regulation, right? Is like feeling safe with others in relationship. And we don't want to make more drama about these more less important things right now because it takes
Yeah.
away from our effectiveness.
Yeah, and if plan A teaches kids to dodge us, like get good at
Yes.
going underground with the things you're doing we don't like, which means we're not breeding honesty. It isn't a partnership, it's more adversarial. And that decreases our ability to have positive influence with our kids. Nobody
Mm-hmm.
wants that, right?
Yeah.
We don't have to be contrary to popular belief, although it's changing, which is great. We do not have to be punitive
Right.
um, to turn out good citizens in this world. In fact, it's quite the opposite. We need to hear them out. Like when you are losing at Monopoly during your play date, what's going on for you? Like, how are you thinking about that? And maybe
Yeah.
come to find out this kid is thinking, I never win anything.
Yeah. I lose all the time.
Right, right. And so we need to come up with a solution that addresses that thinking that's super unhelpful. Because if we can fix that thinking, they won't feel bad and then they won't behave badly, right? So
Yeah.
it's all in like understanding what is their internal world here? How are they perceiving the situation? And then because we got to ask them, right? We ask them for that. Once we have that information, we can tell them what we're worried about, and then we can work on a solution that bridges both sets of concerns. And that's essentially the 3 steps of the model. First, we got to figure out what your
Mm-hmm.
perception of this unsolved problem is. Then once we do that, we're going to work for that. And there's lots of resources on our website to help you do that. Then we're going to tell you what we're worried about in the situation, what's important to us, right? Which is usually pretty simple. We're usually worried about health, safety, learning, right? Something like that. So it's a pretty simple
Mm-hmm.
second step. First step's a little longer. Second step, simple. Third step is how do we help you when you are worried that you're never winning anything in such a way that everyone is staying safe, right?
Yeah.
If,
Mm-hmm.
if that fits the situation, right? And then do you have any ideas? So we're again helping our partner here problem solve in a more adaptive way.
Mm-hmm.
And if they don't have ideas, chances are you do. And you sharing your ideas that need to be feasible, realistic, right? And they need to be mutually satisfactory, meaning not just what you want, not just what the kid wants, but actually addressing both. Um, and you sharing those ideas, if they don't have any, is actually helping them figure out how do I consider ideas that actually work, which is another high level skill on that assessment.
So good. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it really makes me think of like, we're really raising adults. We are giving them opportunities to exercise adult skills that are going to serve them for life. Punishing children doesn't really help them learn how to adult later, right? Like, but giving them opportunities to help solve some of their own problems, having some skin in the game, getting practice while it's still a safe environment where the risks are lower than they will be when they're out there on their own in the world without you being able to back them and, at the office. Um, it gives them that exercise. And I was just thinking how often parents will say, well, you're telling me I can't punish and I can't use threats and bribes and consequences. And often parents kind of get stumped like, but what can I do? Then I don't know what else can I do when it's like, it feels really frustrating. And I was just thinking as you're talking, if it's about solving problems collaboratively with the child, we know that the adult brain is like designed for problem solving. We are like the best advice givers, right? Like we love to solve our problems, other people's problems. I mean, we're thinking about our problems all the time. The brain is designed just to think, think, think. And it's always the negativity bias is like, what's the next problem? So then use that energy as a parent to reframe. You don't have to punish your child or threaten them or use your ability, your higher level adult brain thinking skills to solve problems. And you have to respect your child enough to call them to the table and say, let's try to problem solve together, right? I think there's another paradigm that kids deserve enough of our respect to be asked to sit at the big girl, big boy table with us and to collaborate with us. Not thinking that they're not adults, they don't have an adult brain and they're not in charge. Like we are in charge, but we are like coaching them. We are not giving over our parental authority and now they're the adults. No, we're not saying that. We're saying we're trying to raise adults here. And so we want to coach them to become more skilled at that.
I'm often saying you can't give up your power even if you want to. It's yours, right?
Yeah, you
You
can't
just
even get rid of it, even if you want
right.
to.
We're just
When did that
suggesting
work for you
use
last
it.
time, right? Letting the kids
Yeah,
do everything and they don't even
yeah.
want it.
Right, right. We're just suggesting you use it a little bit differently and
Yeah.
that you teach them to fish instead of just giving them fish, right? And
Yeah.
that's what we're doing. The more we collaborate with them, I mean, the ability to collaborate and work together to solve problems, that's like what employers want, right? So we're
Exactly.
starting
Exactly.
young, which is fine.
Yes. Yeah, and that's exactly what they expect in the school systems. And then again, like you said, like, and it's really an emotional intelligence skill, working with other people. Like we're social creatures, we're wired to live in community. And when you invite your kid to collaborate with you, you're giving them experiences of teamwork and social collaboration, which is, emotional intelligence will get anyone much further than IQ will in comparison, because we live in a group setting. We don't live on an island on our own. So oh, so much good conversation. I know there's a ton more resources and things we could talk about, but I want to direct our listeners to, we're going to link the page below here. So definitely they can start with learning more about the concepts, like you said, and then diving into the assessment. And if you have more than one kid, take the time to go through each one for each child. Even if your kids aren't explosive, even if they maybe don't have some big challenges, I think it's still helpful, right, to look at this preventatively because it's a leadership thing, right? Like it's like, what are your strengths? What are the things that you're maybe not as skilled at as your siblings? Let's take a look, and we can always work on like building better skills in all areas. We can all improve all the time, right?
Oh, yes, there's always room for improvement, even for kids who do school well and who are
Yeah.
relatively well-behaved kids. There's always something they need help with, for sure. I was one of those
Yeah.
kids. And there was
Yeah.
something my parents missed. I always had trouble when the plan changed. Because
Mm-hmm.
it was like my gears got stuck and I wasn't like hurting people over it. So it got misread as, well, she just wants her own way, but that really wasn't it. I mean, we all want our own way, right? It was
Yeah.
more like when you change it on me, I can't adjust. And that stayed
Mm-hmm.
true for me well into adulthood until I found the model and could help
Yeah.
myself come up with strategies
Yeah.
to adjust to a change in plan. And so
Mm-hmm.
yes, even well-behaved,
Yeah.
top athlete, top
Yeah.
academics, they need help too. So this model is very applicable to all kids and really not just kids.
Yes, all of us, right?
Yeah.
Because the brain never stops growing and we never stop learning. The neuroplasticity and the growth mindset really is something that we all need to adopt. Um,
Mhm.
yeah, because eventually we all get stuck in our own adult troubles too. And it's like, how do we solve our own problems then? Well, let's use this framework. It's just as effective because it's for human nervous systems, not just children.
Yeah. Yeah.
Amazing. Thank you so much. Great conversation. I'm really looking forward to sharing this with our audience, and I really appreciate you taking the time to be here today.
Thanks again.
Thank you.